Broadcasting live from Forward Observer Central Command in Austin, Texas. It's the man always out front on the issues. You're listening to Out Front with Mike Shelby.
To everybody, let me take those off. Good afternoon. Welcome. It's Friday afternoon. Welcome to my new afternoon show. We're going to go ahead and continue this next week. I'll be on at 2. I'm going to start this live stream at 2 p.m. Here's what's on tap for today's show. First, we're going to talk about Biden is ending Title 42. I'm going to talk about what comes next. We're going to talk a little bit about what the Russians are doing in Mexico. And I think Dustin, Max, and I will team up probably in the next maybe 2 weeks from now and do a deep dive into Russian and Chinese influence at the kind of a operational level, what they're doing down in not just Mexico, but throughout Latin America. If we have some more time today, I'll talk a little bit more about that. We're going to look at some new economic data that's pointed in the wrong direction. If we have some time, I'll take your questions. And we're going to end with this alleged Ukrainian attack that happened inside Russia. But first, I want to start today's show off with a personal note. I've been going back and forth to Dallas for the past few weeks now, and I didn't want to say anything about this until I knew that it was actually going to happen. So it's a sure thing. Forward Observer, by the way, they're going to make this big announcement next week, probably on Monday, but I wanted to share it with you directly. Forward Observer is being acquired by Blaze TV, parent company Blaze Media. We're not sharing any details, but we're going to be wrapping up our operations here. And by the end of the month, moving up to their studios in Dallas, their corporate office and studios in Dallas, actually in Irving, Texas. And if you believed any of that, then I hope you have a very merry April Fool's Day. By the way, April Fool's Day is kind of fun. And I see why CNN does it every day now. All right, let's jump into some real news here. Let's start with Title 42. I first broke this to early warning subscribers 2 weeks ago. And the Biden administration, I said the Biden administration is getting ready to overturn Title 42. And that decision is now going forward, according to multiple news outlets. I saw it on Bloomberg earlier today. Title 42 allows Border Patrol, allows law enforcement to rapidly expel migrants coming across the border on COVID grounds. And it's a public health issue. CDC, this is kind of CDC's thing. Actually, the Biden administration they were asked about it a couple of days ago and they punted on it. And they're saying, this is a CDC decision. They're going to make this decision, the medical experts. So at any rate, that is going away by the end of May. Down on the southern border, we are seeing right now double the numbers of migrants coming across than what we saw last year. By the way, Dustin, if you can drop that. Yeah, there you go. So when I pulled this slide, there were already nearly 840,000 migrant encounters being reported by Border Patrol. If this rate continues, by the way, you can see in the summer, typically, 2/3 of the past 3 years, traffic coming across the border has gone up during the summer months and into the fall. So if we stayed at the same rate, we could see 3.5 million migrants coming over the border. And that does not include the ones that are not encountered by Border Patrol. And by the way, that is only Southwest border encounters. Last year, Border Patrol in total reported 2.3 million encounters, with over 1 million of those, I believe, were immediately turned away under Title 42. That still leaves over 1 million left. The rest were allowed, as I understand it, allowed to remain in the country. Meanwhile, the Biden administration is, last year, they only deported 57,000. And those are going to include illegal immigrants and also those who have overstayed their visas. So we have inflation. We're going to experience a food crisis. It's going to be much more difficult in third world countries, including in Latin America, Central and South America. And I talked about that for several minutes on Thursday's High Side briefing. And now we're going to have potentially millions of additional people, much higher than in previous years, coming across the border to compete with American families at the grocery store, at the gas station, other places where Americans shop. And they're paying higher prices for just about everything. And this is actually so bad that two Democrats from Arizona, Mark Kelly and Kirsten Sinema, they both lobbied the Biden administration not to repeal Title 42. They said, look, it's already straining border communities because these people come across the border, they go to these towns, and they're already having lots of problems about this. And so you know how bad this is when Democrats come out against it. By the way, we also reported 2 weeks ago that DHS and the Office of Intelligence and Analysis, I think it's INA, they said that 1 million migrants are camped out on the border and that they would start a wave. They're talking about 500,000 to 1 million coming over the next several weeks, or not next several weeks, but over several weeks after the Title 42 is officially repealed, which I think is going to be at the end of May. Over at DHS, there is what's called an irregular migration contingency plan. And so apparently DHS does have a plan for this. I haven't looked, but I imagine that's probably not public record yet. But according to some Republican senators, DHS, even though they have this plan, they lack the ability to implement the plan because they don't have enough resources. There's just simply not enough personnel to deal with the volume of people here. So this decision goes into effect at the end of May. By the way, I was talking this afternoon to an old friend of mine who now works over at DHS, and he's got some stuff dropping on Wednesday. And I wish I could let you know what it is. He's been a whistleblower in the past, but surprisingly wasn't fired from his job. I actually called him up as soon as it was over on Project Veritas, and I looked at it and I said, "Holy cow!" Actually, my old boss sent it to me first, and I called him up. I'm like, "Man, if you get fired, come work at Forward Observer. Like, we got you. We can take you on." But so anyway, he's kept his job and he's continuing to report on some stuff. So I think that's also going to be at Project Veritas on Wednesday, and I promised I wouldn't say anything. As soon as Veritas lets it go, I'll tell you more about my conversation with him. And what he's talking about is what the Biden administration is allowing to happen. And I do think this is absolutely treasonous because it is a grave violation of national security principles. And so much, and maybe we'll start playing this game on the show, evil or stupid. Is what they're doing stupid? It's due to ignorance or antipathy, or due to incompetence, or is it just plain evil? But I'll let him tell you that officially on Wednesday over at Project Veritas. By the way, this is a good time to remind you. First, thank you for watching this show and watching this channel. Second, in case we get the boot on YouTube for bringing you our uncensored opinions, you can catch us over on Odyssey, on BitChute, a couple other places. I'll have Ben start putting links in the description for everyone so you know where to find us. Or you can just become a Forward Observer subscriber and get access to all of our videos, ad-free. Everything. I think earlier today, Max gave a brief on North Korea stuff. And so you can do that over at, you can get access to that at forwardobserver.com/subscribe. Next, let's head down to Mexico City for a quick follow-up on something we talked about briefly yesterday. U.S. Ambassador to Mexico, Ken Salazar, addressed Mexican lawmakers last week, and he almost begged them for their support to sanction Russia. So far, Mexico and their president, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, AMLO, has said that they're not going to get involved. They're going to remain neutral. It's not Mexico's place to get involved in this Russia-Ukraine war, and which is frankly really smart for Mexico. So at any rate, Salazar went down there and addressed Mexican lawmakers because Some members of the Mexican Congress have formed a pro-Russia caucus. They want closer ties with Russia, not closer ties with the United States. And they had invited Russian diplomats, including the Russian ambassador to Mexico, as their guests of honor during one of their sessions. And the United States, the State Department, did not like this at all. Here's what U.S. Ambassador to Mexico Ken Salazar had to say in response. He said, quote, "We have to be in solidarity with Ukraine and against Russia. The Russian ambassador was here yesterday." By the way, this was last week. The Russian ambassador was here yesterday making a lot of noise about how Mexico and Russia are so close. This, sorry, can never happen. It can never happen. When a family is attacked, the family comes together. Between Mexico and the United States, there can be no difference. We have to be the same, end quote. And this is interesting because we have followed for some time. Actually, this goes back to probably 2017 or 18. Then Defense Secretary Jim Mattis, and I forget if it was Rex Tillerson or Mike Pompeo at the time, whoever was at State Department. They went kind of on a whirlwind tour of South America. They went to Brazil, they went to Argentina, to Chile, to Colombia. I want to say like one or two other countries, and they warned them that China was offering them these very nice loans for economic development, building deep water ports, helping them expand their export or import terminals, trying to get them a better position into the global economy so they can sell more stuff, so they can make more money, raise their GDP. And, they're very blunt. And of course, this is old news now. This was a big thing back during Trump. I'm just saying this to recap. Everything that China has been doing in Africa, they've also been doing in South America, which is coming in, promising and giving these very large loans. Eventually, these countries are not going to be able to pay back these loans, and China's going to come in and take the critical infrastructure. They're going to take control of these ports or shipping terminals or whatever they're helping to build, pipelines, and then China's going to own that stuff. And I want to say that China has interest in something like 2/3 of the world's ports now. When we talk about Western colonialism, we're talking primarily, military and political kind of colonialism. China's colonialism right now is economic and commercial. So it's a very different approach to, China says, well, look, instead of putting 10,000 troops in your country, we're just going to come in and start buying up all your critical infrastructure. And so that's a very different way to colonize the world, and China is doing it. Like I said, we'll have more on that, and since I think we'll have time, I don't know, a year and a half ago, I sat down and talked to this guy from Colombia. He's at our neighbor's place. He's a cattle rancher in Colombia, and he started talking about Colombian elections, which, by the way, they're coming up in May of this year, I want to say. Yeah, so the presidential election there, it's May 29th. So Ivan Duque has been the president there. He was he's considered a right-wing conservative president. He can't run again, and so now I forget the two candidates' names, but one's a leftist. I mean, he's like an AMLO. They say he's like a Chavez or Maduro, and he started talking about the in Peru, Fujimori lost, and it's a guy's named Castillo. Let me look this up real quick because this happened last year. Yeah, Pedro Castillo, and he's another lefty guy. And he started talking about all these left-wing presidents being elected and trying to take over in South America. And he said, look, this is all the Cubans. It's Cuban intelligence coming in. Of course, Cuba probably backed by the Russians or backed by the Chinese, or maybe both. Cubans coming in and trying to drum up popular revolutions against right-wing presidents and trying to shift the entire continent to the left. And one of the things that American diplomats have been telling South Americans, actually all throughout Latin America, is, yeah, we've ignored you for a long time, and we're sorry that we've ignored you, and it's time we stop ignoring you. Rex Tillerson was in Austin in 2018 giving a speech, and that's in effect what he said. The Monroe Doctrine The Monroe Doctrine was named after President Monroe back in the 1820s. I think it became official policy in 1823 or somewhere thereabout. And that was the United States policy, foreign policy, on keeping European powers out of the Western Hemisphere. Because the United States said, look, we don't want to have to keep fighting these European wars that they've been fighting for hundreds of years. Let's just keep that out of the Western Hemisphere. And then that's where you get the Banana Republic because of the late 1800s and early 1900s. And so now it's like there's kind of this catch up. I mean, this is why Mattis went down to Brazil and why we've been sending officials down all throughout South America, just warning them, hey, China and Russia are moving into the Western Hemisphere. And in effect, you kind of need to choose which side you're on. So that's very interesting development and something that is very interesting to me because, yesterday I talked about Medvedev. Actually, I said Medvedev is the Russian president or Russian prime minister. He's actually not. He left office in 2020. Now he's like the director of the State Security Council or something like that. At any rate, still like a pretty influential guy in Russian politics, I think. Yesterday he was talking about, there's going to be a new financial order. This is a mistake the Americans made by sanctioning us, and now all these countries are going to be able to get together and chart a new course, essentially for the future of global commerce and trade, and also for the world reserve currency. So, given that we're seeing the shift from the unipolar world to a multipolar world, of course, that's nothing new either. We've been talking about that for, I don't know, 5 or 10 years now. Even during Obama, we were talking about the multipolar world. Basically, what China's coming in and saying is that, look, Latin America needs a more prominent role in global influence and global trade and commerce. And I think a lot of the South American governments are very open to that. And that's a very different message compared to what the United States has been telling them, which is, in effect, we're ignoring you and we think you're just a backwater. And thanks for being our neighbors. I would say that's by and large true, except for Colombia. We've been very involved in Colombia, helping the Colombian government there defeat the FARC. In June, President Biden is going to name Colombia as being a major non-NATO ally, which is very new. When Mattis went down to Brazil in 2017 or 18, he gave a speech at the Brazilian War College, in effect telling the officers there, putting that American spin on it. So this is a kind of a new world for Latin America, and it's something I think the United States has ignored, and they're trying to catch up on it now. And it just so happens that China's coming in and they're able to throw a lot of money around, and that's something the United States is not really. That's something the United States cannot do, is throw the amount of money down in South America or Central America that the Chinese are able to do. We will, we'll do a deep dive and talk about some of the other things that China and Russia are doing in Latin America. That's probably be a couple weeks from now, but let's move on for now to some new economic data. So this morning, latest ISM manufacturing survey data is out. New orders continue downward. So about a year ago, they reached a peak of 65, and now we're down to about 53.8. Let's just call it 54. So 65 to 54. And the way to read this is anything over 50 is expansion in manufacturing. Anything below 50 is contraction, i.e. recession, or at least contraction in manufacturing. So the fact that we've gone from 65 to about 54, we are headed in the wrong direction. Also, ISM prices paid are up. Manufacturing prices paid are being up. Those prices are getting passed on to the consumer. So if I were a betting man, I'd say that March inflation, when it comes out here in the next week and a half-ish, March inflation is going to come in higher than 7.9%. And it may continue up for the next couple of months. I do think, listen, here's part of the thing about, Dustin just said that. I think this was in this morning's report. Chinese manufacturing index fell to 48.1. So that's below 50. That's also contracting. So here's what they're going to do with this whole CPI thing, consumer price index, which measures inflation. Of course, real inflation is probably closer to 15 or 16%, maybe also headed higher. CPI, one of the biggest numbers when they calculate CPI year over year is base effects because it's compared to 1 year ago. And so as we went through a period of disinflation in 2020, yeah, we started and into 2021, yeah, we started to see inflation uh, be greatly increased because we are going from a lower rate of inflation to a much higher rate of inflation. Well, now that a year ago we're getting past that disinflation, CPI year over year is going to start to shrink. Well, let me say this: CPI year over year may start to shrink, and it's interesting because Larry Summers has been saying that this period is like the Great Inflation. Late 60s into the late 60s, we had runaway inflation, and then inflation started to recede. We didn't have deflation; we just had disinflation, which is inflation that's losing acceleration, is starting to slow down. And then in the 70s, we had obviously massive spike of inflation. If we do repeat something like that, this is going to be a massive, massive problem for the next 3 to 4+ years. And at any rate, we talk about this stuff every Thursday. We do a full workup, provide our latest economic outlook for subscribers. If you'd like to follow along with our research, then you can become a Forward Observer subscriber at forwardobserver.com/subscribe. I tell you what, we'll take a couple questions for today. By the way, I have the early warning chat up. So if you're an early warning subscriber, go ahead and jump in and post questions if you have any. And Dustin, if you can help me check out some of these questions over here in the YouTube chat, we'll do a couple questions here. Before we hit the last item on today's show, which is this Ukrainian attack in Russia, it's only going to take me a couple minutes to cover, though. Yeah, by the way, just a reminder to everyone, starting next week, the show is going to be at 2 p.m. Central Time, 2 p.m. Central Time, and it will be on YouTube, also over on our early warning platform over at forwardobserver.com. All right, well, if there's no questions, we'll just move on to this Ukraine thing and be done with it. Any word of a Nicaragua canal being put back on the table? I don't know. You know, the Chinese, they're flirting with this whole thing about the Panama Canal, and I know that countries, I mean, like Russia and Nicaragua. By the way, Russia has permanent military presence in Nicaragua. I know they've been talking about potentially digging another canal just so that they have access, or they have control over one of those. I haven't heard anything about that in a while, but I can go back and check on it. Yeah, I see a lot of people in the chat saying China owns a lot of land in the United States. And that is one thing I would actually like to see. You know, of course, I really don't advocate for a lot of policy, but I would like to see the forced sale of foreign-owned land in the United States. And just because it's, well, for a lot of reasons, economists won't like that because the United States is only an economy after all. That's the only thing that matters, is that we have economic growth continuing upward. National security doesn't matter. The ability for millennials and first-time home buyers to afford a home doesn't matter. We have to keep allowing BlackRock and this Toronto-based real estate company. We have to allow them to buy all the homes so that they can just rent them out to everyone. You keep up with Larry Fink and BlackRock. Oh, of course, I talk about BlackRock every single week, every Thursday. My economic early warning. I'm talking about what they're doing and where, what they're saying, where they see things going. Let's see. Do you think the Biden administration will take Russia's getting involved in Mexico seriously? Well, it kind of depends what you mean by seriously. I mean, I think they are. You know, this. I'll keep a better eye on what State Department officials are having high level meetings with Latin American countries, but there's no really controlling AMLO. Look, Trump actually had a really good relationship with AMLO because Trump said um, you know, Trump came in and said, "Look, Mexico, you have to start doing more to stem the migrant flow." And that's not good for Mexico because they have more people in Mexico. That contributes to inflation. It contributes to security problems. They have no idea who is camped out at their northern border with the United States, and so AMLO actually did try to stem the flow from southern Mexico. And then Biden comes in, and it's just like the floodgates getting blown wide open here. So Governor Abbott's been quiet. Has he sold out? I think Abbott is playing. Abbott does two things. Okay, when the closer we got to this primary on March 1st, Abbott swung to the right. He started going kind of hard conservative issues, talking about conservative pet peeves, really drumming up a lot of support. And I think he's moderated his position in the middle of his term because honestly, I think he wants to run for president. And I think he thinks it's going to be easier for him to run for president as a center right candidate or a moderate right candidate than anything else. But we cannot allow Greg Abbott to become president. I wish he weren't the governor of Texas anymore either. All right. Well, I'll tell you what, Abbott absolutely sold out. All right. Let's talk about this last thing. So you may have seen this oil depot fire in Russia. I think it was in Belgorod, Russia. This is what the Russian Defense Ministry is saying. Quote, 2 Ukrainian Mi-24 helicopters entered the Russian Federation's airspace at an extremely low altitude at about 5 o'clock in the morning, Moscow time. And there's an Mi-24 up on the screen there. On the 1st of April, the Ukrainian helicopters delivered a missile strike on a civilian oil storage terminal located on the outskirts of Belgorod. A number of tanks were damaged and caught fire. After tanks, by the way, being fuel tanks, not T-80s or whatever. A number of tanks were damaged and caught fire after being hit with missiles. And the spokesman said, quote, "I'd like to stress that this facility is used to supply fuel only to civilian transport vehicles. The oil terminal has no relation to the Russian armed forces," end quote. Now, maybe that's true. Maybe the Ukrainians said, this is just the nearest target that we can strike. I haven't pulled up the military geography of that part of Russia. But if it's within reach of Ukraine, I would imagine that fuel would have been used by the Russian military, especially since the Russian military's had these problems with logistics and fuel in the first place. And really, if Ukraine wanted to do maximum damage to the Russian military, they would select a target that's being used by the Russian military. So this is what the Russians are saying. Of course, the Russians, kind of like the American government, you really can't trust anything that they say at face value. And with that, let's do one more question. By the way, that came out after our early warning this morning. And so Dustin will talk about that and a few other things, related topics, on Monday. Where is Mike reporting? I don't understand the question. Yeah, we'll do one more question here. Have you heard of Regis Tremblay? No, I have no idea. If or when the U.S. collapses, we'll finish on this. If or when the U.S. collapses, will the cartels start to control area on the U.S. side of the border and become the de facto government like the Taliban shadow government areas in Afghanistan? Well, it kind of depends. It depends what you mean by collapse. I dislike the term collapse because you could say we're in a period of collapse right now. Collapse doesn't have to mean from 100 to 0. You talk about a stock market collapse, I think that's like 20 or 25%. So, if you go from 100 to 80, well, technically that's a collapse. So it really kind of depends on what you mean by collapse. However, I think if there is a legitimacy crisis, And that's brought about by the biggest thing is capacity. If the United States loses capacity, if they lose the capacity to enforce the law, I mean, arguably they've already chose not to retain the capacity to protect our border, then yes. And like you look at Texas law enforcement, there are some areas down near the border where Texas law enforcement, I don't believe, really goes. There are all those signs that was, especially on the Mexican side, and I want to say this actually happened on our side, on the Texas side of the border too. Yeah, Plata o Plomo, basically saying silver or lead, and that was a, I mean, that's a threat. That's basically saying, hey, you work with us, or you work with us, and we'll pay you off, or work against us, and your head will be on the front of the police station, on the police station steps. So I am concerned. I've talked about this a little bit before, but yeah, I am concerned about the cartelification of the United States because they're simply, I mean, they're ruthless. They're willing to do anything to continue making money. Being arrested and going to prison, I mean, ain't nothing but a thing for them. But for someone like you or me, I mean, we really don't want that to happen. So, pretty, yeah, that does concern me. I can't make any predictions because, like I said, collapse is just a very vague term, but that absolutely does concern me. All right. Well, everyone, I hope you have a great weekend. We'll be back in your inbox on Monday morning. Dustin will be back on the Daily SA starting at 9 a.m. Central Time. Until then, be well and stay out front.